That seems awfully weird, don't you think? Yes, it does seem weird. It seems downright crazy, and I don't know how it could be possible, but I swear to God it's true. I saw that man's face from almost the same identical angle Friday afternoon. I know it's the same person, the same man I chased on the grassy knoll. I absolutely know it is. Hello and welcome back to my channel. I'm Jess Cannell, and if you're new, then welcome. I'd love to earn your subscription today. We are continuing our walk through JFK, The Last Dissenting Witness by Bill Sloan with Jean Hill. Jean Hill was the red-coated woman that was close to Jackie Kennedy the day that Jack got shot. And so she was there at Dealey Plaza. She accounted for us in the last couple of episodes that she actually watched the assassination. She heard Jackie shout out, "My God, they've shot my husband." That she watched the motorcycle of the policeman circle looking for anyone else, that she saw a man running almost immediately after the assassination from the school book depository toward the grassy knoll, and that she, like many others, ran up the hill, up the grassy knoll toward what she presumed was the shooter. I will say there's a few things that I want to get out of the way before we begin today's reading. One is that I came across another photograph, which I'm not a researcher. I don't have some sort of catalog of moment by moment photographs or evidence list of exactly what happened in Dealey Plaza that day. There was a video that showed the moments immediately following the assassination, and there happened to be one where you can see Jean, and she is on the ground near Mary. And so it's possible that that's the moment where I think she said Mary tried to pull her down, but then she recounts running up the hill. And my real point is that it appears to be at least a good, let's say, 60 seconds after the shots. It's clear that it's like the moment after the motorcade has passed, and some people are running, but some people are still seated, and she's there. So I don't know. I did think about that would be an interesting thing. Because she has the red coat, it should be fairly easy to go through some sort of photographic record and observe where was she at various points. I don't have the means to do that, but I would actually be happy to do that if any of you know a resource that has those photographs. We are going to keep going through her story. I find her to be a storyteller. I think some of what she says is demonstrably true. I am starting to question how much of this is sensationalism, how much of it has been added, which parts of it are true. And I don't like feeling that way from a witness. We have another book that I just received in the mail that we will probably do soon. It's by Dr. Crenshaw, JFK, The Conspiracy of Silence. And I hope to find him much more credible. He actually is a physician that worked on both Kennedy and Oswald at Parkland Hospital. That book, I believe, hopefully will be more credible. I do want to hear the next little bit of her story. I think we might have today and perhaps one more. I want to understand what she asserts about the evidence and her treatment afterward. So that's what we're going to get today, is how was she treated by law enforcement officials after this? And she also gives us a peek into, remember, she asserts that she had started a somewhat dating/sexual relationship with one of the officers who was in the motorcade that day. His name is J.B. Marshall. His head is in the photograph that Mary Moorman took from their position. He is that motorcyclist who was in the rear coming up behind Kennedy's limo when the fatal shot happened. So she asserts that she had already begun and was in the middle of a sexual relationship with him. And so we get a little bit of his perspective as well as a Dallas police officer. So This is chapter 2, and at the start of it, she is just waking up with her children, and the reality of the moment is setting in. She sees a headline that reads, "Kennedy slain on Dallas Street. Johnson becomes president." And so her mind is fluttering back and forth. She reads about Lee Harvey Oswald. She hears about him. Authorities seem to have little doubt that he was guilty as charged, although, like Jean, several other eyewitnesses expressed the belief that some of the shots had come from the Grassy Knoll area. There was no official talk of other suspects. At the time the newspaper went to press, less than 12 hours had elapsed since Oswald's arrest, but it was already being made to sound like an open and shut case. She is just thinking through these things in her mind. She thinks about JB, and she feels sad because he had gone on a 10-day hunting trip, and he was scheduled to leave immediately following the assassination. That he had just happened to have a vacation scheduled, that they knew the presidential visit was happening and they were going to leave right after, and she asserts that they did. It says, the hours crept by and Jean lost all track of time until the telephone rang at a little before 4 o'clock that afternoon. The caller identified himself as a correspondent for CBS News. "We're trying to interview as many assassination eyewitnesses as possible," he said. "If you wouldn't mind, we'd like to come to your home and shoot you sometime in the next day or two." "You'd like to what?" "Shoot you. I mean, film an interview with you at your home. That's 9402 Bluff Creek, right?" "Yes, but how did you know where to find me?" "Well, that was easy. When your name and address gets broadcast on network television, you can't be too hard to find. Don't you remember being on NBC Friday afternoon?" Not exactly," she said vaguely. "I know I talked to a bunch of reporters, but I guess I didn't have a chance to watch much TV that day, and I never got to see myself." "I guess it'll be all right if you want to come out. Just tell me when." The CBS reporter wasn't the only caller that day, however, and the next one wasn't near as friendly. "Are you Jean Hill?" he asked in a tone that was amiable enough at first. "Yes, I am," she said, thinking it was probably another newsman. "What can I do for you?" "For starters, you can learn how to see better and talk less," he snapped, his voice suddenly changing. "I saw all that bullshit about how you thought you saw a second assassin when Kennedy was shot. Somebody besides Oswald, I mean." "That's right, I did," she said firmly. "In a pig's ass," he snorted. "You saw a second assassin about like you saw a dog in Kennedy's car. You said that too, didn't you? You said you saw a dog in the president's limousine. How crazy can you get?" Jean suddenly felt a tingling wave of embarrassment, and she knew her face was flushing bright red. She had been afraid that her chance remark about the dog would come back to haunt her, and now it had. It was all so stupid, so totally insignificant, and yet so damning at the same time. "I saw something, some kind of movement down in the seat of the car," she said lamely. "My attention was focused on something higher up, and I just caught a peripheral glimpse of it. Later, I asked somebody, could it have been a little dog? Liz Taylor takes a little dog around with her, but I can't see Jackie bringing one on a trip like this. So in the confusion of the moment, with all these reporters yelling stuff at me, I said I saw a dog." "There was no damned dog in the car, lady," the caller said coldly. "Well, I guess I saw something else then. Maybe it was a bouquet of flowers or the paper they were wrapped in. All I know is I saw something moving." Jean had, in fact, seen a picture of what she now suspected was her notorious dog on an inside page of the Dallas Morning News that very morning. It was a large bouquet of yellow roses, which had been given to Nellie Connolly, the governor's wife. The photo showed the bouquet disheveled and abandoned on the floor of the presidential limousine as it stood outside Parkland Hospital. "I don't think you know shit, lady," the caller snarled. "And if you can't tell the difference between a dog and a bouquet of flowers, how the hell can you expect anybody to believe you saw somebody shooting at Kennedy?" "Because that's where I was looking," Jean said helplessly. "I wasn't looking down at the seat of the car. I was looking up toward the grassy knoll." "Well, I think you'd better just keep your mouth shut from now on," the caller yelled, "because you don't know what the hell you're talking about." He hung up with a crash that made Jean's ears ring. She sat there for a long time afterwards, shaking inside and cursing herself for saying something so thoughtless and inane. But Mary hadn't known what the flutter of movement in the car seat could have been either. And at the time, amid the constant storm of questions and the pressure-packed intensity of the interrogation, with the news people all rushing her, it hadn't seemed that important. "Just say what you saw," one of the reporters had urged. "If you think you saw a dog, say you saw a dog. What difference does it make?" And so she had blurted it out, not once, but several times. Now it was clear that it did make a difference, she thought. It gave those who sought to promote Oswald as the lone assassin a convenient, if clumsy and inconclusive, tool to cast doubt on her reliability as an observer. In that sense, although Jean didn't realize it until much later, it would continue to make a difference for a very long time to come. Yeah, to me, this seems like an insertion into the moment. She wasn't probably thinking about any of this at the time. But in the moment, she was probably just feeling humiliation at having shared this thing that, and to me, this does cast a pall across her credibility of that multiple times in interviews she says she saw a dog. It makes me think, even if everything you're saying is true and you did look across the grassy knoll, if you were able and willing to stake your credibility on something so stupid here, then why should we believe your quick observations about anything? To me, this is the kind of thing that makes people go, yeah, eyewitness testimony isn't all infallible. It's not. Even as the pain and shock eased, Jean sensed the beginnings of an entirely new emotion, fear. Never in her adult life had Jean been accused of being shy, reticent, or easily spooked. She had always been self-assured. But now she was beginning to regret her outspokenness about what she had seen in Dealey Plaza. The man who had called about the dog had done more than just chide or ridicule her. There had also been a strongly implied threat in his words. Newspaper editorial writers and TV commentators across the country were already referring to Dallas as a city of hate, and that hate was starting to manifest itself in various ways. So they skip ahead. They're getting ready. They have an opera performance at the Dallas State Fair Music Hall of Carmen that she and her daughter were going to go see. And so amidst watching the TV for updates about the assassination, they're getting ready for the opera. It says she was all dressed and they were ready to leave when Jean called out to her daughter, "Come on, baby, if we're going to get lunch before the opera, we need to get started." As she headed for the den to turn the TV off, it was apparent as she approached the set that the long-awaited transfer was underway. She saw Oswald being led past throngs of newsmen and officers by a detective in a tall white hat, and she hesitated for a second as she reached out for the on-off knob. In that instant, the scene before her seemed to jump straight out of the screen and hit her squarely in the face. She saw a stocky man in a hat and a dark suit dart from the right side of the televised picture with a pistol in his hand. She heard the pop of a gunshot. She saw Oswald cringe and grimace in pain as the bullet tore through him. And in that phenomenal instant, she recognized the stocky man with the gun. She had never seen him but once before, but she recognized him as surely as she would have recognized her own face in a mirror. Jean gasped, wide-eyed. As policemen converged on the gunman from all sides, she shrank back from the TV, feeling faint. Her daughter ran toward her in alarm. "What's the matter, Mom? What is it?" "That man," Jean choked. He just shot Oswald. He shot the man they say killed Kennedy." "Oh, no. What man?" "I don't know his name, but I recognized him. I swear I did. He's the same man I saw running in Dealey Plaza right after Kennedy was shot." Jean's 10-year-old daughter looked at her with an expression she was destined to see innumerable times on other faces in the months and years to come. "Are you sure, Mom?" The doubt obvious in her voice. That seems awfully weird, don't you think?" "Yes, it does seem weird. It seems downright crazy, and I don't know how it could be possible, but I swear to God it's true. I saw that man's face from almost the same identical angle Friday afternoon. I know it's the same person, the same man I chased on the grassy knoll. I absolutely know it is." After she had somehow managed to get Jeannie to the music hall, she spent the rest of the afternoon wondering in all seriousness if she were losing her mind. Maybe the psychological stress and mental anguish of the last 2 days had simply driven her over the brink of insanity, she thought. She didn't feel crazy. Disturbed and on edge, yes, but not crazy. So we skip ahead. We get a little biographical information about her life, and they get us up to the point where she had been teaching school, but she and her husband decided that she would be a stay-home mom, to be devoted to homemaking, but instead of making their life together better, this change only seemed to cause their relationship to deteriorate. Within a few months, severe marital difficulties had developed, and suddenly Jean was facing the greatest crisis of her life as she saw her marriage falling rapidly to pieces around her. And now this. Time and again, she watched the TV replays of the first murder in history to be broadcast live. She watched the man who had now been identified as the Dallas nightclub operator named Jack Ruby as he materialized out of the crowd in the basement of the Dallas City Hall with a revolver in his hand and lunged toward Oswald. And each time the scene repeated itself, she felt the same burst of recognition as she saw Ruby's half profile just as he pulled the trigger. To Jean, that was one of the oddest parts of all. She hadn't gotten a full side view of the gunman, but in her mind there was no doubt whatsoever that he was the same man in Dealey Plaza. The feeling never faltered, Jean would recall many years later. Every time I saw the scene replayed, the feeling was exactly the same. I knew this was the man in the brown coat, the one I had seen running toward the shooter a split second after the fatal shot hit JFK, the same man I had chased when I ran up the grassy knoll. Even today, Jean has no logical explanation for this remarkable case of déjà vu, but it is certainly worth noting that a number of other reliable witnesses also claim to have seen Jack Ruby in Dealey Plaza at the same time of the assassination. One of them was Victoria Adams, a school book depository employee who told the Warren Commission that she and a woman co-worker, Avery Davis, saw a man in the plaza just minutes after JFK was shot who looked, quote, very similar, end quote, to the photos of Jack Ruby that were published and televised after Oswald's death. Cameraman Malcolm Couch of WFAA Channel 8 in Dallas testified that another newsman had seen Ruby near the depository right after the assassination. That other newsman was Wes Wise, who would later be elected mayor of Dallas, but who would never be called by the Warren Commission to confirm or deny Couch's testimony. Although Couch's hearsay account has been repeated in many assassination-related books, none of their authors apparently bothered to contact Wise for verification. Wise told this author in June 1991 that his remarks had been misinterpreted and that he had actually seen Ruby in Dealey Plaza on November 23, 1963, the day after the assassination. I just want to say, too, that I have a book. It's actually right here. It's called Forgive My Grief by a man who lived right here in the Dallas area named Penn Jones Jr. And one of the accounts that he gives is one from a lady named Julia Mercer. And she identifies this very same thing, except hers. So the same situation of watching the assassination and realizing that Jack Ruby is a man she had seen. That is exactly what happened to Julia Mercer as well. And her account is that she actually saw him. She gives a deposition. I'll just show you the page of this. She gives a deposition where she says she saw two men heading up the grassy knoll the morning of the assassination, before it happened, and that they were in some sort of, I believe, cleaning truck. It said air conditioning. It said air conditioning, and there was a truck with toolboxes in the back, and she sees one man going up with a long box and one man sitting at the wheel of the truck. Later, so this is her actual statement that she signed at the police station. And she said the man who remained in the truck had light brown hair, and I believe I could identify him also if I were to see him again. So she describes the two men. And then later, she claims that while she was watching the assassination of Oswald that she identified Jack Ruby as the man she had seen, one of the two men that was there that morning. So I just want to say multiple people had seen Jack Ruby in some context and had the same timing of their own realization that that was the man they had seen. In addition, there would be several other witnesses who produced testimony or evidence placing Ruby in Dealey Plaza at or around the time of the assassination. Among them were an off-duty Dallas policeman, a Dallas amateur photographer, and a key witness discovered by New Orleans District Attorney Jim Garrison during his investigation of an assassination conspiracy. But unfortunately, many years would pass before any of these other witnesses became known to Jean. Yes, like if this same event happened in the internet age, there would be a forum on Reddit, or there would be a Facebook group of people contributing, or there would be people live tweeting out what they had seen and observed. But at this time, the witnesses didn't even get to talk to each other. They didn't even have any way of connecting with one another. At any rate, the sheer unbelievability of what she had seen, coupled with the indelible images burned into her consciousness, propelled Jean into another long, introspective letter-writing session with the legal pad that afternoon. If she could just get enough of her impressions down on paper while they were fresh, she thought, maybe she and JB could tie everything together in some logical way when they were able to sit down and discuss it. One of the things she wrote was, I had never seen this man in my life before Friday, and then only at a distance. He was a total non-entity to me, so how could I remember his face so clearly when I saw him again on TV? And what caused me to be right there, no more than a couple feet from the TV screen at the very second Ruby appeared? Was that just some kind of coincidence, or was it fate? We get some emotional goings on, how she was emotionally a wreck because JB was gone and she was having to deal with all this alone. I'm not going to read those things. But it says she did 3 interviews at her home with representatives of major TV networks, carefully avoiding the subject of small dogs in all 3. She prepared a Thanksgiving dinner for herself and the kids. She called Mary a time or two, but neither seemed to have much heart for long conversations. Jean didn't even try to tell Mary about the similarity between Jack Ruby and the running man in Dealey Plaza. She did make an attempt, however, to explain the similarity to a few close friends and members of her family, with very unsatisfactory results. You need to relax and try to get yourself together, one friend advised. Seeing something like that can be an awful shock, and you sound like you're under a hell of a strain. She argued vehemently with her soon-to-be ex-husband when he came to pick up the children for an outing. He made his feelings crystal clear about her media interviews and her claims of multiple assassins. You're behaving like a total fool, Jean, he told her angrily. I can't believe you'd say all these silly things to anybody, much less to all those reporters. If you don't have any respect for yourself, it looks like you'd care enough about the children not to embarrass them like this. JB calls her at some point, and she's so excited to hear his voice. He's just outside of Dallas and wants to see her and says, can they get together? She says, I can't wait to talk to you, JB. Have you heard about everything that's happened, about Ruby and Oswald? Yeah, he said grimly. The first thing we did this morning when we got out of those mountains and back to civilization was buy a stack of newspapers. That was the first any of us had heard about it, but I read most of the way back when I wasn't driving. Damn, I can't believe something like that could happen right there in the city hall basement. I mean, I just want to say, what about the assassination? To me, these kinds of details somehow just don't have the ring of truth. I feel like what they would be talking about in their first conversation after all of this would be, I still can't believe the president's dead. I watched the thing happen and I still can't believe it's happened. Maybe that's me inserting myself in it, but I just can't imagine that they'd be like, oh, I can't believe Oswald got shot right there. To me, that seems a little less monumental. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this was historical, and I do know for the whole nation to observe a murder on television was a big deal. It sure makes the Dallas police look like a bunch of damned morons, he said. She specifically, parenthetically specifies that he says police. I bet there's going to be unmitigated hell to pay because of it. It'll blow over, she said. At least you didn't have anything to do with it. Well, I'm sure not looking forward to going back to work, he said, but I am glad to be home. I missed you, Norma Jean. So they make plans to get together. Her long-awaited reunion with JB could hardly have been begun on a more romantic or exhilarating note. I don't know what that means. It's hardly a romantic moment. And then it goes on to describe him. Listen to this. He had been as unshaven, disheveled, and road-weary as she had expected. That does not sound romantic or exhilarating. But he had seemed just as thrilled to see her as she was to see him. And for the first hour or so after they were alone together, there had been an abundance of physical and emotional communication between them, but very little of it had been of the verbal variety. I mean, I can kind of believe that that's true, given the nature of their relationship. He was not like the rock husband that she had turned to for years and years and needed to process all of her thoughts. She had been writing out her thoughts. So their relationship is primarily emotional and physical, it seems. Eventually, though, she had gotten around to telling him what she had seen at the moment of the assassination, and they had taken time out from their lovemaking to relive those fateful moments and compare notes. Now we get JB's account of the assassination, so let's listen. I couldn't hear the shots over the noise of my cycle, but I could see what was happening, JB explained. And that makes sense if you think about the roar of the motorcycle. I hadn't fully thought of that, but that makes sense. When that headshot hit Kennedy, I was sure it was coming from the right front because of the direction the blood flew. It looked to me like at least 2 people were firing from a forward position, and I thought there might be as many as 6 in all. The first thing I thought was, oh shit, they're going to pick all of us off like ducks in a gallery. So I started circling, figuring a moving target would be harder to hit. That's what you were doing when I ran past you, Jean said. I saw a puff of smoke and a figure with a gun behind the wooden fence at the top of the grassy knoll, and I started running that way. You almost ran over me. Sorry, he said, but I never knew you were there. I was too preoccupied with the snipers. Are you saying you actually saw somebody fire at Kennedy from behind that fence? That's what it looked like. And then I saw another man running toward him a second after the shots were fired. She decided for the moment not to tell him that the running man had been an absolute double for Jack Ruby. Could this other guy have been some kind of law officer? Maybe he was just trying to grab the guy with the gun. No, I didn't get that feeling, Jean said. I can't really explain why, but I had the distinct impression they were in it together, and the second man was running up the hill to help the first one get away. JB laughed and lit a cigarette. I can just see you taking off after those 2, he said. I don't guess you caught either one of them, did you? No, she admitted. By the time I got there, there was total confusion, but damned good thing, too, JB interrupted. If you'd found them, you just might have got yourself shot like poor old Tippett did. Well, I still might have found them, she said defensively, except that 2 guys who said they were Secret Service collared me about that time and dragged me away. Oh, come on, Norma Jean, what are you talking about? There weren't any Secret Service on the ground in Dealey Plaza, at least not as far as I know. I thought they were all in the cars. Well, you'd better check again. These guys were either Secret Service or they were lying through their teeth. She went on to recount in detail the tedious, exhausting, frustrating hours that had followed, the confiscated photos, the intimidating strong-arm tactics of the men who had detained her, the questioning in the criminal courts building, the media interviews, and all the rest. When she finished, JB was no longer laughing. He wasn't even smiling. You need to keep quiet about all this, he said gravely. I don't think you ought to be talking to anybody about it anymore, okay? I'd just as soon nobody knew who Jean Hill is or what she saw. It's a little late for that, JB, she told him bluntly. Good Lord, I've already been in the papers and on all the TV networks. At least I guess I have, because they all interviewed me and I told all of them what I saw. So everybody already knows about it, and people have been calling me from all over wanting to talk. He looked at her and shook his head. I wish you hadn't done that, Norma Jean, he said unhappily. I was just trying to do my duty as a citizen, she protested. What's so wrong about that? Nothing, I guess, he said. It's just that citizens who mind their own business have a habit of living longer than citizens who don't, that's all. After that, some sort of invisible barrier seemed to have risen up between them to mar the intimate sense of closeness, almost of oneness, that they had experienced such a short time earlier. Well, that is a mouthful. Yeah, They had experienced oneness, because that's what sexual, connectedness does for us. It's what it's designed to do, is to make us unified with one other human on the planet. And so she was definitely experiencing physical oneness and emotional oneness on her side. But yeah, an invisible barrier comes up because he knows the reality of the danger she's in. And from everything I've heard from all the reports, the Dallas Police Department was a very unethical place at this point in time, that there were a lot of fixed cases, that there were a lot of connections with the underworld, one of which was Jack Ruby. And so he would have known those things. Whether or not he was a participant in them, I'm not asserting that. I don't know J.B. Marshall. But he certainly would have known, hey, there's a whole dark world you don't understand, and now you're in it. So yeah, he says he's hungry. He goes to get some food and doesn't say much. She asks him to read her writings, and he says he would. He says he'll read every word, I promise. Then he kind of is looking uncomfortable, and she says, what's going on, JB? And he says, my wife's coming back from California tomorrow or the next day. I wish she wasn't, but she is. I thought all that was over, Jean said. I thought you were permanently separated and getting a divorce. So did I. I've told her to go ahead with the divorce, and I thought she was going to, but hell, Norma Jean, I don't know what she's trying to prove. Just wants to stir up some trouble, I guess. Jean tried to smile, but it didn't work very well with the hot tears that were welling up in her eyes. So she's emotionally distraught over JB. Now we're going to get the last little bit of her interactions with some FBI agents. Toward the end of the first week in December, Jean received a telephone call from a polite, quiet-spoken man who identified himself as J. Gordon Shanklin, special agent in charge of the Dallas office of the FBI. Before we move on to one more section of this story, I just want to point out that there are some things that, as she's putting this in paper in 1991, she actually, some of these things could have been checked up on. Was J.B. Marshall actually disconnected from his wife during that time? Did she come back on this particular day? And then she's about to get into some things with the FBI that are also things that could be checked in on. So let's go ahead and read this section. Toward the end of the first week in December, Jean received a telephone call from a polite, quiet-spoken man who identified himself as J. Gordon Shanklin, special agent in charge of the Dallas office of the FBI. I understand you were an eyewitness to the assassination of President Kennedy, he said. Is that true, Mrs. Hill? Since it was clear that he already knew the answer to the question, there was no point in being evasive. Yes, but I've already told the authorities everything I know. Well, I hate to bother you, but it would be very helpful if we could just go over it with you again, just to make sure we have everything straight. We also have some photographs we'd like you to look at if you don't mind. Jean thought back to what JB had told her the previous Sunday night, and she hesitated. She hadn't seen JB since then, but she had talked with him twice by phone, and even though she had been decidedly cool toward him, he had repeated his urgings not to discuss anything she had seen in Dealey Plaza with anyone. I don't really have anything to add to what I've already said, Mr. Shanklin. It was a very unnerving experience, and I'd just as soon not talk about it anymore. Couldn't you just leave me out of it? I understand that's how you feel, Mrs. Hill, but I'm afraid that's impossible. I promise we won't take more than 1 minute of your time than we have to, but we want to do everything in our power to determine exactly what happened that day, and so I'm going to have to ask you to go back over the whole thing again. Well, all right. When do you want to talk to me? I'd like to have you come down to our office tomorrow morning. I'd send a car for you so you don't have to worry about finding your way. Isn't that an awful lot of trouble? I mean, can't you just talk to me here? We have some very large photographic illustrations of the Dealey Plaza area that we'd like for you to look at, and it will be much more convenient to do this at our office. By the way, we can explain this situation to your employer if you have to take time off work. That's not necessary, she said. I'm only working part-time as a substitute teacher right now, and I don't have an assignment for tomorrow. Her voice was steady, but there was a discerning sinking feeling in the pit of her stomach. She had never dreamed they would make her go to FBI headquarters to be questioned. She had just assumed they would do it at her home. She felt like a third-grade pupil being summoned to the principal's office, and without knowing why, she felt scared. Very good. We'll pick you up at 10 a.m. if that's agreeable to you. It was odd, she thought, how people like Shanklin could make it sound as if you have a choice in something when actually you have no choice at all. Okay, she said and hung up. The surroundings into which Jean was ushered the next morning bore little resemblance to the interview room in the Dallas County Criminal Courts building where she had been questioned nearly 2 weeks earlier. The Dallas FBI headquarters was on an upper floor of the federal building on Commerce Street, several blocks removed from Dealey Plaza. But it was coldly impersonal, devoid of windows, and crowded with well-groomed men in stiff white shirts and conservative gray and dark blue business suits. And in a way, its atmosphere was even more menacing than the other place. The two men who had driven her there in a plain, unmarked Ford showed her into the office of Special Agent Shanklin, who turned out to be a kindly-looking, middle-aged, slightly pear-shaped man in a rumpled, unstylish suit. This is what I mean about her giving these sorts of details. You can't make this kind of stuff up because anybody could go and look up what he looked like and verify that he was an agent and all of that. So these things must have certainly happened. To Jean, he looked more like a fatherly college professor than one of J. Edgar Hoover's top men, and she might have liked him if the circumstances had been different. As it was, his warm handshake and disarming smile were probably intended to set her at ease, she thought, but somehow they didn't quite get the job done. "Thank you for coming, Mrs. Hill," he said, as though she had some say-so in the matter. "We appreciate your cooperation." It soon became apparent that he was only one of several agents that was going to participate in the questioning. She was led into a larger room where there's a long table beside a series of huge photographs that leaned against the wall. Each of the pictures looked to be half the size of the garage door on Jean's house, and each showed a portion of Dealey Plaza in such infinite detail that she could practically count the blades of grass. Even that, I would love to know if there are other eyewitnesses and those who were questioned who experienced this same room and this same photograph. That's very interesting to me that there was this massive photograph, half the size of a garage door. That's huge. Shanklin introduced the first man as a fellow FBI agent, but Jean was stunned to learn that the other man was with the CIA. The thought of being interrogated by the FBI was scary enough, but the idea of the CIA was somehow even more awesome. "We want to show you these pictures very carefully. Show us precisely as you can where you were in Dealey Plaza at the time the presidential motorcade arrived there on November 22nd. She went to a photo taken from the north side of the plaza and pointed to the spot in the grassy triangle where she and Mary had stood. It was almost as if she could still see their footprints there. And she was certain that the spot she indicated was within a foot of their exact location. Could it have been only 2 weeks, she wondered, when all of this had happened? "My friend and I were right here, right at the curb," she said. "I assume you're referring to Mary Mormon, Mrs. Hill, is that correct?" "Yes, we were taking pictures." "According to the Dallas police, that area was closed to civilians," the agent said. "So how did you happen to be there?" "We persuaded one of the officers on duty that he should let us go in there to take our pictures." "And how did you do that?" I guess you might say we flirted with him," Jean said, feeling her discomfort beginning to grow. "I see," said the agent. "And do you think the fact that you were well acquainted with other members of the Dallas PD had some bearing on his decision to let you in?" The question caught Jean off guard, and she managed to say, I guess it might have." "Did you mention J.B. Marshall's name to this officer? Is that one of the reasons he let you pass?" I might have. Yes, I probably did," she said, growing steadily more unsettled. "What exactly is your relationship with Officer Marshall, Mrs. Hill?" Jean felt a light film of perspiration forming on her face. How did they know about J.B.? What else did they know? "He's a friend." "An intimate friend, Mrs. Hill?" "You could say that." "How long have you known him?" "About a month, I guess, maybe a little more." "And would it be accurate to say that you are romantically involved with Officer Marshall?" Jean felt something inside her snap, and a wave of anger momentarily inundated her fear. "I don't think that's any of your business," she snapped. "What does all this have to do with the Kennedy assassination anyway?" At that point, Shanklin interceded. "I apologize for my colleague," he said, smiling at Jean. "I think we should move on to another line of questioning for right now, Jim," he said to the other agent. "We can come back to that later if necessary." At this point, the man whom Shanklin had identified as a CIA agent assumed the lead role in the interrogation. You said you were right at the curb on Elm Street as the presidential limousine approached, he began, but weren't you actually in the street itself for several seconds? Yes, she said, regaining some of her composure. I jumped into the street and called out to the president to look in our direction. We wanted to take his picture. Is that the only reason you were in the street? She frowned. Yes, of course. And why did you suddenly jump back from the president's car at almost exactly the instant the shooting started? I just realized I probably shouldn't be so close, and I decided I'd better get back. Did a bullet hit the ground near you? Was that one reason you jumped back? No. I mean, if it did, I didn't see it or hear it. But you do claim to have seen someone fire at least one shot from almost directly across Elm Street from where you were standing, right? Yes, from behind the wooden fence at the top of the grassy knoll. The agent named Jim picked up an oversized photo of the knoll area and the fence and put it down beside her. Show us where you think this gunman was at the time, he said. Jean pointed to a spot near the corner of the fence at its eastern end. Right about there, she said, feeling a little of her confidence returning. If they wanted to talk about the shooter, she had no doubts about what she had seen. And you believe this shot you say you saw was one of the shots that hit the president? Well, I can't be sure, Jean said. All I know is I saw the puff of smoke just as the president was hit in the head. I understand you also saw someone else acting suspiciously, Shanklin asked, in his usual let's be friends tone. Why don't you tell us about that? I saw a man running from the direction of the school book depository toward the spot where I saw the shot fired. Did you get a good look at this person? The CIA man asked. Good enough to identify him if you saw him again? Yes, I saw him very clearly. Had you ever seen him before? Not that I remember. She tensed suddenly, anticipating the next question. Have you seen him since? Cold, sticky panic rose up inside of her. Did she risk being called an idiot by telling them she believed the man to be Jack Ruby? Or did she deliberately lie to the FBI and run the risk of something far worse? She looked desperately towards Shanklin, hoping to find some kind of reassurance in his face. He was smiling expectantly at her and clearly had no inkling of her dilemma. Yes, she said in a hoarse whisper. I'm almost sure I have. The CIA man raised his eyebrows in surprise. You have? Where? On TV, she said miserably. I saw him shoot Lee Harvey Oswald on TV. The CIA man's jaw dropped perceptibly. The FBI agent named Jim looked as if he had just swallowed something distasteful. Shanklin chuckled softly, stubbed out his cigarette, and immediately lit another. I want to make sure I understand this, Shanklin said finally. You're telling us that the man you saw running in Dealey Plaza was Jack Ruby, but you didn't realize who it was until you saw him shoot Oswald on TV? Am I getting it right? Jean nodded. Look, I know how stupid it sounds, but I honestly believe it was him. When I saw him run up and shoot Oswald, I almost fainted. You could ask my daughter. Shanklin smiled at her. I'm sure you do believe it, Jean, but you don't mind if I call you Jean, do you? She shook her head. I don't doubt your sincerity for a minute, Jean, but the fact is it couldn't have been Ruby. We've got several witnesses who can place Ruby somewhere else at the time of the assassination. I don't know anything about that. All I know is what I saw. I don't think you saw anything, the CIA man said bluntly. I think you've got an overactive imagination. Plus, maybe you like all the attention you've been getting lately. Could that be it, ma'am? I'm not making this up, damn it. Whether it was Ruby or not, I know what I saw when Kennedy was shot. For what seemed to Jean to be an hour or more, the questioning revolved slowly and tediously about the identity of the running man and the jumble of interwoven Dealey Plaza images that were burned into her brain. And inevitably, the questions came back to the same point again. You can't really be sure that this running man had anything to do with the assassination, now can you? The CIA man asked. I felt sure about it at the time, Jean said. Since you know now that Ruby was somewhere else, are you willing to say it definitely wasn't Ruby, then? The second FBI agent pressed. Jean's head was spinning, and she felt totally bewildered. No. I mean, I still think... I don't know. Shanklin glanced at his watch. It's all right, Jean. It's almost noon, and I think we've put you through enough of this for one morning. Why don't you think it over the weekend, and we'll talk next week. I'll call you on Monday. You mean I'm going to have to come back down here and do this again? She asked brokenly. Oh yes, Jean. Shanklin's smile never wavered. The only thing for us to do is to keep right on going over the whole thing. We have to go over it and over it and over it until we're sure we've got every detail straight, regardless of how long it takes. Well, that is the end of our reading for today, and it's very fascinating. Very interesting, her account of things. It's interesting that there were FBI and CIA working together. It's interesting that they were honing in on this particular detail, and that she says that's where her testimony rested, was that this was Jack Ruby that she saw. Very interesting. I'd love to know what you got from this reading, what you're interested in. I think in our next and probably final episode, we are going to get JB's reaction to these things. And I might give a quick preview of the days and years that follow. But in this episode, we got a great look at the investigation into her observations and her own sense of emotions and what she was concerned with after the assassinations. I'd love to know your thoughts, your observations. If you have unanswered questions, if you have suspicions about her or any concerns about what we've read, I'd love to hear that in the comments. Again, we are not reading this with the eye that everything she is saying is 100% true and we just have to take it as it's written, as the exact gospel truth. We are doing this so we can understand her particular perspective as one of many witnesses to that event. So I hope you're enjoying it. Let me know in the comments, and we'll see you back next time for one more episode with Jean Hill. Have a great day. Bye.